See, we bringing stuff to the table that the Most High never said.
Right.
There's a lot of things that we do. The Most High said, I didn't tell you to go around teaching that. Now, anybody in the Old Testament that didn't serve the Most High can be a heathen.
I agree with that. Yeah. All right, okay.
There's a difference between a heathen and a Gentile.
Okay.
That's biblical.
It's biblical.
Right? So there's a difference between Israelites can be heathens.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Right? So the way the Most High sculpt this thing is that technically, Israel was birthed out of a nation that wasn't Israel.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So technically, the foundation of Israel were Gentiles, mm-hmm. or heathens, Let me say that. Heathens, right?
I agree.
So they became a people that were righteous, but the birth and the inception of the one who first got the line started weren't Israelites.
That's right.
Right? So we all good there. Okay. So let's go to the first slide. Yeah, if you could turn me off on the music. Paganism is a term first used in the 4th century by early Christians for people in the Roman Empire who practiced polytheism or ethnic religions other than Judaism. In the time of the Roman Empire, individuals fell into the pagan class either because they were increasingly rural and provincial relatives to the Christian population, or because they were not milites Christi, soldiers of Christ. Alternative terms used in Christian texts were Hellene or Gentile and heathen. Next slide. Modern paganism, also known as contemporary or neo-pagan, encompasses a wide range of religious groups. See the difference? In the biblical and antiquity time, there's an understanding of what paganism is. But in the modern times, there's a broad classification, right? Broad. Look at what it says. Modern paganism, known as contemporary or neo-pagan, encompasses a wide range of religious groups. Now we go from a wide range of religious groups from in the foretime, it was mostly an ethnic group, right? Versus a religious group. Why? Because in the biblical times, religion and culture was the same. In the biblical times, culture was how you identified people. In our modern day, a title of what religion, there's a system that's put in place that defines who you are and what you believe and how they identify you. Well, in Israel's day, they only thing they wanted to know is, okay, who you follow, what your God, with the battle of the gods. Who your gods is, well, our God do this. These are the instructions that we follow. So you can have two classes of people that were black, but then they define who's who by the practices of their customs, right? Well, they followed the true and living God because their God had them doing this, but not only that, their God was with them through victory and through being victorious. It says here, these may include old occult groups, those that follow a new age approach, those that try to reconstruct old ethnic religions, and followers of the wide pagan religion or Wicca. So modern day, you can just throw paganism on anybody. However you please, just like the word cult. The word cult has become a wide net. People call them the Israelites, they cults. Some of them are. There are some Israelites that are in cultic groups having cultic activity. There's some Christians that have cultic groups and cultic activities. Go ahead, Deke.
They was pagan back then.
They pagan back then, they're pagan now, yeah. Absolutely.
I just don't understand how the transformation came about, or who caused the transformation to come about, where it was in the Old Testament talking about basically an ethnic group of people or a nation of people. And now we're going from a nation of people to a practice of certain individuals.
Yeah, because in these modern times, things transition, things change with men. Men determine a lot. Even back then, by the time you get to certain Israel going through different captivities, they had kings and in their captivities where they dictated certain things about worship.
So what were they calling paganism in the first, second, and third century? Since it did, we saw from the other slide that it wasn't started used to the fourth century.
Well, the term itself has started to become popularized, but the act of paganism is not new. So a person will say, whatever term they use in that day, they might have said, well, they worship the god of Astaroth in the groves, or they worship Artemis. They didn't say paganism, but Israel looked at those other deities as not being true. And those other deities were viewed as idolatrous, because it's idolatry when you sculpt it and create it. It's paganism when you start practicing. We're going to see that here in a minute. Idolatry is when the person sculpted and created. Idolatry has to happen first before the paganism can be rooted.
So paganism is a byproduct of idolatry.
Right. Paganism, idolatry opens up the door for paganism, for you to start doing things towards that particular deity. That's right. So let's go to the next. Paganism Bible verses. Deuteronomy 12:31. You shall not worship the Lord your God in that way. See that? Listen to him. Look at the instructions that the Most High gives. He gives clear instructions of how to worship him. See, we bringing stuff to the table that the Most High never said.
All right.
There's a lot of things that we do. The Most High said, I didn't tell you to go around teaching that. It's clear when you look in the scriptures what he get the instruction he gives us to teach. We start adding and sprinkling everything. That's what Israel's problem was. And here's the thing. Here's what I want y'all to realize. Every time the Most High gave an instruction, Israel did the opposite.
Wow.
Every time he said, don't worship me this way, they do it that way.
Same thing in the garden. Don't touch.
So it tells you the disobedience is a spiritual problem.
Right.
Disobedience is a spirit, and disobedience comes from the enemy.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
It's a spiritual problem. Because it starts even in the garden. Hey, don't touch the tree. Mm-hmm. Now, here's the thing. We have the ability and the power and the willpower and know-how to not do and to do.
That's right.
So we have the power not to. We have the power to follow this instruction. And we also have the will to not to do it and not to do it. So the Most High said, I'm going to lay this before you. Don't do this. But then he steps back and watches to see if you're going to, because if that's the case, then we would be controlled agents. Mm-hmm. Then we can't authentically love him. We can't authentically love him, and we can't authentically appreciate the gift of free will. Right? So look at what it says here. He said, don't worship me in that way, which means he has a specific way that he wants us to worship him. For every abominable thing that the Lord hates, they have done. Mm. So there's a particular people that have done things that the Most High hate, even if he ain't even supping with them. Mm-hmm. These things that there's things in the earth that regardless if you're a believer or not, he just can't stand. Because it's so against his holiness and his righteousness, he just can't stand the act of it. Don't matter if it's a person that say they believe or a person say they don't believe. It's still something that he detests. Right? We got people that are believers that say that they attract, they're attracted to the same sex. He created them that way. There's some things that he just detests, right? It's detestable. I don't care if you say you believe, you've been baptized, you speaking in tongues, you doing all this other stuff. It don't matter. It's something that the Most High just detests. Another thing that he detests is causing division amongst the brethren. So in discord, it don't matter if you're a believer or unbeliever. There are atheists that sow discord that is detestable to him.
That's right.
So imagine a believer. It's detestable. It's just certain things that the Most High just don't do. It's certain things that the Most High just not down with. That we have to really understand what he's trying to get. Shabbat Shalom. It's just really something that he really trying to get to us so we can understand so that we can be true worshipers. Right? So he starts here in Deuteronomy. He starts here by guiding and instructing and giving instructions of how to worship him because they don't know. See, the issue in Egypt with Pharaoh is it's not all this other stuff that we make it out to be, right? It's not all this other stuff about him just totally mistreating Israel. That's really not the big deal. The big deal was him preventing Israel from worshiping. That's the big deal. So now you will let them worship and see all these other erected deities, over 300 deities in Egypt. You'll let them see that. If they want to worship, you will. But then now I want them to worship me, and you're preventing them. Why? Because worship, let me say this, worship to the Most High is more than your freedom.
All right.
Yeah.
Because true worship will bring you into a place of deliverance no matter where you at.
Have mercy.
Physical freedom don't mean that people are going to truly worship. Right?
Right.
People got their freedom all day long. In America, you got all the freedom you want pretty much, and you still don't worship.
Well,
There are people in other countries that don't have the freedom and the liberties to even carry around a Bible, and they find themselves having to hide, and they going up in mountains and rocks. They climbing up to 100-foot high into a cliff because they can worship in the cliff. Even some of them to the point to where they're strapped babies. I remember me and Dick Phillip, we watched a video. I think we shared it back and forth or something, but there was I think it might have been in Ethiopia, or someplace in the desert. The only place that had water for baptism was in a mountain, and the water wasn't a river. We talk about water that's running down a rock, just not a lot of water either. They're putting their children on their back, climbing. They're not walking, and there ain't no trail. These folks are climbing women, facing death, because one slip is a wrap. Just to baptize their children and to truly worship the Most High.
I believe they believe the higher the water, the more holy.
More holy.
Right. But it's like almost in the desert place, like in the middle of the desert. So the water is flowing from somewhere, and it's not a lot of water, but the appreciation and the love to risk death to get to the Most High. And we have the freedom to go to a beach, to a pool, or somewhere, and we arguing over shit, somebody be baptized and all this other stuff. It's crazy. But let's look at what it said, because I want to try to get through this. Go back, Elder. I want to try to get through 2 Kings 16:3. Matter of fact, let me finish Deuteronomy. It says here, the Elohim hates they have done for their gods. He hate what they done for their gods. For they have burned their sons and daughters in the fire for their deities. Now think about that. I want y'all to pay attention to this. See, they're in the act of paganism, right? Again, you can't be a pagan, or you cannot practice paganism without first creating the idol, right? So the idol is created already here. Now the act of paganism is the act is burning their children to what has been erected. right? That's when you're in paganism. Paganism, idolatry is different. Idolatry opens up the door for paganism. 2 Kings 16:3. But he walked in the way of the kings of Israel. He even burned his son as an offering, according to the despicable practices of the nations. All right. Well, this word here would be goyim. Right. Again, there's a difference between when we get into this thing about covenants, we're going to talk about the ger, the nakar, as well as the goyim. It's three different. When you look in the Hebrew, it's nations, but that term can also, or a foreigner or sojourner, can also either mean ger. All right. We're going to get an understanding what that means. We're going to goyim and nakar. OK, so let's look at this right here. Right. So practices of the heathens or the nations, all right, which is idolatrous and paganism, right? So that's why I use the term heathen to describe, some wicked folks. That's the reason why it's using that term to describe some wicked folks. So we have to really understand. We're just going to Shabbat Shalom to understand this. So it says here, let's go to the next, elder. All right, 2 Kings 17:17 in the ESV here. It says, and they burned their sons and their daughters as offerings and used divination.
See?
So this is a stronghold.
They got priests and priestesses now. They're using divinations.
They're using divinations. So now this is a major spiritual issue. Meaning to the point to where the enemy, Hasatan, right? The accuser. But this is, you talk about darkness on another level when you start operating in divination. Because now you're doing now you're summoning spirits. Right? It's a difference in creating. See, in the foretime in antiquity, when you had the idols being created, right? The purpose of creating the idol is because they believe that a spirit that was contrary to Yah was alive and well. This is why you see in the scripture where he says, those gods who live. It's not that the Most High himself is in competition with other deities. Mm-hmm. He's speaking from a perspective that since you believe that they're alive. So he's speaking from the perspective of the person who believes it. Now, yes, there is a dark force. There is. But during idol worship, they create these idols, a habitation and a place for the spirit that they believe in that is living, to give them a place to reside.
Right. Creating
a temple for them, right? Into this thing. So they say, okay.
No different from what the Most High one did. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. So we're the temple, right? Here's the thing. He creates Adam. He sculpts him. And then he breathes theonosis or life. So he puts his ruach in a man for habitation, right? Same thing with us. So Adam falls. Now all of a sudden that place, that temple that was supposed to be righteous and a place to reside, now there's a competition between there's a man, flesh, not the devil. The flesh, when the flesh was never the flesh shouldn't have never been a place of competition for the spirit. But Adam creates this atmosphere so that now we have these issues with proclivities where now we have these desires that the flesh was never intended to have. So now the spirit is in competition with that. And then all of a sudden, Yeshua, Mashiach, has to come to give us something that will overpower our flesh man. And then the only way you keeps it strong is the word and through fasting and prayer, right? That's the only way you keep your spirit man strong. When you don't feed him, your flesh man feeds off of ungodliness and worldly stuff.